are now listening to the Film Situation podcast.
I'm so happy to have Paul Wagner and Casey Wagner on the Film Situation podcast. Welcome, Paul and Ellen.
Thanks. Great to be here.
It's really fun to be here.
So I guess we're gonna talk about your documentary about Georgia O'Keeffe, The Brightness of Light, which I watched and I loved. By the way, absolutely loved it.
Oh, great! Oh,
Very
thanks.
nice.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So we're gonna get into detail about that, but I guess
Right.
before that, introduce yourselves for the audience and how you got into film in the first place, really.
Yeah, you always joke. I got into filmmaking because I flunked out of graduate school. I couldn't think of anything better to do.
Did you love
know,
movies when you were growing up and stuff?
Well, I was just going to say, you always hear these stories from like Steven Spielberg. He was 8 years old and was watching a movie, was mesmerized and said, I'm going to be a filmmaker. I was like the exact opposite. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I, like a lot of people who don't know, you just keep going to school, till you figure out something. And I actually had an undergrad, a master's, and I was working on a PhD and still didn't really know what I wanted to do.
Oh, wow.
And
PhD. Yeah.
Well, I didn't finish the PhD because what happened is I stumbled, by accident, took a course in documentary film.
Oh, wow.
And oh my gosh, this is great. This is something I actually want to do. So I left the PhD program, sort of became an independent filmmaker. This was in Philadelphia in the late 70s, actually.
Nice.
And, I started collaborating with friends on things they were interested in. And one thing early on, we won an Academy Award for Best Short Documentary for a film called The Stone Carvers, about the Italian-American stone carvers at the National Cathedral in Washington. So that was a huge boost, obviously.
Yeah.
And kind of also pointing in the direction of making films about American life and American culture and American history. And I met Ellen in Washington. She had recently finished a film about American history, working for public television for WETA. So I'll let her fill in her part, but basically we met each other, decided to, fall in love and become collaborators in filmmaking. So
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I moved to Washington a little bit after college with a pretty vague notion that I maybe would want to get involved in filmmaking of some kind. And it was quite unformed, and I did get a job at WETA, and so I started working in public television. And then after a few years, left and had met Paul, and we got married, and we started working together pretty shortly after that. I worked briefly for an independent filmmaker, Ginny Duran. But when Paul says we on the Stone Carvers, that was not me. Right. That was his friend and colleague, Marjorie
That was
Hunt,
before
we had even met.
Either way, I'm honored to have an Oscar winner on, and both of you, because pertinent timing of the 250th anniversary of America, which you guys are making such topical films.
Yeah.
So it's
Ellen created a nonprofit organization that's kind of how we make our films, and it's called American Focus. The whole idea is to make films about America and her people. And
Love
so,
it. Amazing.
50th, everybody has different feelings about it. We were just talking about just this afternoon. It means a lot to us. We love this country. We love the place we live in. And most of all, we love the people. The country's great, and what it stands for, the ideas, but what makes those ideas real are the people. And that's what our American Focus, that's what we try to make films about, is America and her people, the people who give the values and the life and the energy to this place we call our home.
I love it. I was just actually in DC a few weeks ago at the National Archives Museum at a film screening over there, and there was a 107-year-old veteran that was at the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
And they introduced him, and I heard I mentioned this on the podcast because there was an episode that I just did with the producer Jonathan Younger that it's about to come out tomorrow, and they were showing a movie called Lucky Strike, which was a fictional film that took place during World War II. It's out in theaters right now. And I was invited to the screening and interviewed the producer who who I'm friendly with, and there was a young woman that said about that veteran that was like, wow, that guy's a legend. And it made me realize how usually that word is used very loosely, but this guy really was a living legend. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, those are the kinds, I mean, we could, that's a film that we might have wanted to make. Those are the kinds of stories that we want to tell about amazing people, but also amazing people who are not famous people. You know what I mean? Like everyday people who have done great things in their lives and great things for, the place they live.
I'm all about that. I love that. And although I'm more of a narrative filmmaker, I'm about to make my second narrative feature in October.
Cool.
So we're kind of getting deep into prep at this point. But I love documentaries and, so I was grateful to come across your documentary that was sent to me by Betsy, I guess, your publicist.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And, then was just, it went from one of these things. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to watch? Now I'm like, oh, this is a gem,
That's great. Thanks.
Not that I was skeptical, but you know how it is because you just never know. I just went in blind completely. And I really, in full disclosure, I didn't really know anything about the artist Georgia O'Keeffe, except for her name, like I've heard of her name, of course. But I don't know if I would have been able to pick out any of her paintings or anything like that. And
oh, that's great. Well, you're a perfect audience for the film.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I was telling, oh no, go ahead.
You could have been in the opening scene, Zeph, for the people listening in.
Right.
The opening scene is in an art gallery in Switzerland, and we interview people, and they're like, "Who's Georgia O'Keeffe? Never heard of her. Who? And I don't know who is this Georgia O'Keeffe person." And kind of one of the points we make is that she's very famous. At least her name is very famous in America, but she's actually not that well known in Europe and other parts of the world. And we kind of put that at the beginning of the film because we want the film to welcome her fans, the people who love her, know everything about her, and the people who don't know anything about her.
Yeah. It's funny because I mentioned it to my mom, and I was like, have you ever heard of Georgia O'Keeffe? She's like, yeah, of course. She's one of the most famous American artists of all
generational thing. And actually, we've had, we kind of laugh. Our audiences tend to be, like my age, later in life and gray hair. And that was kind of now that you've seen the film, you understand why. But, she kind of became famous as an artist in the 1920s, but famous as a woman artist and as a feminist in the 1970s, which is sort of when I was coming of age. And a lot, especially not just men, but especially women, became fans because she was a great role model for a whole generation of women, kind of feminists, but, broadly understood. They just young women who are discovering themselves and their generation. And she was this huge inspiration. But what happens now is, so that's kind of our core audience for the film. But those women very often bring their daughters and sons and younger family members like you, Zeph, to the screen. And so it is kind of cool because for the older generation, they think they know everything about Georgia O'Keeffe. And they always say to us afterwards, I love Georgia O'Keeffe. I thought I knew everything about her until I saw your film and I learned so much. And then the younger audience like you, they're like, wow, I'd heard that name, but I didn't really understand why she was important and how amazing she was.
And had what first drew you to Georgia O'Keeffe? Like, how did you guys select this as a topic?
Well, it's funny. We, in some ways stumbled into it because we were here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we knew that she had lived here briefly. There's a historic marker outside the house on Wortland Street that she lived in. It was because her mother ran a boarding house there. Wow. And this was the early 20th century. And she was here the summer of 1912, and her sisters said, you should really take this art class at the university. And she said, no, I don't want to. And they convinced her to take it. At that point, she had not painted in 4 years. She had completely turned away from doing art, took this art class, and was completely transformed and inspired again and started doing art again. And by the next summer, she was a teaching assistant in the class and was a teaching assistant the next few summers. And it just turned her life around. So it was a huge moment for her. And we saw a small exhibit about her time there at the university in those summers at the Fralin Art Museum here at the University of Virginia. And we just thought, this is an amazing part of her life that people really don't know about. So we thought about doing just a short film about that part of her life. Then as we got into it, we realized there hadn't been a major film done on her in decades. So we got very interested in pursuing it. And the more you learn about her, the more fascinating she is. I mean, she lived almost a century. She was just an incredible person in so many ways. So that kind of launched the whole long project, which we started, we started developing it very late in 2018 through 2019, raised money. Early in 2020, went out to Santa Fe to start research. And that was the week COVID hit the country. And so that, in some ways, it didn't hurt the project that much because we were still developing it and throughout COVID. And then when we were able to get vaccinated and get back out there, we could get out and do our filming and interviews with people.
Nice. How many, I know from sort of watching it, but how many interviews were there?
I think we did close to 15 interviews with all of our major biographers and scholars, art historians. And we filmed in pretty much every location she lived in the country. So that was a thrill. We were at Lake George, New York City, here in Virginia, of course, here in Charlottesville, Texas, and New Mexico.
Yeah. Everybody associates her with New Mexico.
Oh, excuse me, and Wisconsin, where she was born.
Oh,
she was born in Sunbury, and her father's farmhouse is still there.
Nice.
I mean,
yeah. One thing that really struck me while I was watching it that I thought it was just remarkable, just the level of congruency that she seemed to have in kind of every aspect of her life. It wasn't just like her paintings, but the way she dressed, the way she was photographed, her handwriting, the home that she lived in. And it just, everything seemed to kind of come from that same artistic voice. And I just thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, as we said earlier, we've made a lot of films about American people, but this is the first film we've made about kind of an artist. We've done a lot of work on folk artists and, artistic traditions and that sort of thing. But this is the first time we've done a profile, a biography of a fine artist. And one of the things that just amazed us was you just come to realize, yes, she was a skilled technician. She had great, facility with paints and brushes, but the power of her personality is what makes her an artist. Just her vision of the world, the way she expresses herself in the letters that she writes. We were able to draw on 25,000 pages of letters between her and her lover and artistic supporter and eventually husband, Alfred Stieglitz.
Yeah.
And you just get this intimate sense of her from these letters back and forth between them of how intense her personality was. And you just realize that's what infused her art and what made it great. It wasn't just that she was, handy with a paint and brush and stylist. It's because she saw the world in a very specific way and had the willpower and the strength of mind and heart to express herself very bravely on canvas, often under a lot of criticism. And especially, think about it, a woman in the 1920s when there really were hardly any women fine artists. And here she was just making these paintings that came under a lot of criticism, a lot of praise, but also a lot of criticism. And she just stood up and kept making it happen.
Yeah, it seemed like she was really ahead of her time in a lot of ways. And
totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that happened, Helen talked about this, she stopped painting for 4 years. What was happening with her artistically was earlier when she was like a teenager, she was really successful in art school, was winning awards and everything, but she was painting in what was basically kind of a Western European tradition, try to paint a still life and make the light look perfect and make it totally realistic looking. And she got kind of burnt out on that approach of realism or naturalism and stopped painting. Then when she started again, she kind of took up the philosophy of a man named Arthur Wesley Dow, who had studied Asian art, not so much, Western European art, but Asian art, where the whole focus wasn't so much on realism, but was just on the beauty of, the painting or print or whatever it was. And that's what got her excited. It was like, it doesn't matter if it looks like reality. What matters is, does it express what I'm feeling? And is it beautiful just as an object? Is it a beautiful painting apart from whether it looks real, like a real mountain or a real still life or whatever? And that really liberated her thinking. And it tapped into her individuality and her unique vision as an artist, not just as a technician.
Yeah, it was, that was really interesting to me too, the whole section where it talked about how up until that point, a lot of American artists were regarded as just ripping off Europeans, and she was sort of uniquely American in that sense.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty
we
cool.
were talking about America. She laughs at she's, just for people who don't know the story, she's married to this guy named Alfred Stieglitz, and he's like the king of art in New York. And all the great painters hang out with him because he's like the kind of the art guru of New York at that time. This is the 1920s. And all of them, all the men are trying to they realize America's still kind of copying Europe in the arts, in writing and poetry and playwriting and painting and sculpture. And they're like, no, we have to find the American painting, the American poem, the American novel. So they were all talking about this American thing, that they were looking for and knew that it was going to happen soon, and they could be the ones to do it. And O'Keeffe just rolled her eyes and laughed at that because, of course, these guys had never been west of the Hudson River. They didn't know anything about America.
Yeah.
It's like that old poster from the New Yorker, it was like, shows Fifth Avenue, on the west side, and then some unknown expanse of nothingness out there. For the west.
Yeah, that's so true.
But the thing is, O'Keeffe knew America. She had lived there. I was saying, she lived in Charlottesville and Wisconsin and Texas, and she knew the country and knew its people, and had a sense of just artistic traditions and ways of expression, language and geography that these guys who were all about, we're going to do the American thing, they didn't have any idea what America was. So she was uniquely placed to actually become one of the first great American artists, not just a great artist, but a great American artist, where you could see in her work, a vision of this country that was fresh and quite different from Europe. She had never been to Europe when she became famous. She had studied art. She knew what was going on, intellectually and everything, aesthetically, but she had loved this country and its people and had drawn her inspiration from America, not Europe.
Well, yeah, it was so long ago that she became famous that it was harder to travel to Europe at that time.
And part of it too, yeah. Although the men went back and forth more.
Say it again?
But the men went back
Oh,
and forth.
okay. Like by boat and stuff, like in the 1920s?
Yeah.
And stuff? Yeah, that makes sense.
Sail back. Stieglitz had been educated in Europe, actually, in Germany. Obviously they went back and forth a lot.
Right.
But they brought Europe art to New York, for example. They had a Picasso show in Stieglitz's gallery, and so they knew what was going on there, as she did, but she had no interest in going to Europe. She, found her artistic inspiration in this country.
I actually watched it. I watched it twice, the documentary.
Oh,
so
wow.
I really enjoyed it. But then I really like the sequence too, where she was meeting Stieglitz, and then her friend showed Stieglitz the drawings, and then just like that whole sort of build up there. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, it's part of what's interesting about her story. To just amplify that, she sent the drawings. She was in South Carolina teaching in a small school, girls' school, and she did these charcoal drawings, and they were abstract. They were just kind of out of her own mind. They didn't depict anything out in the real world. and she rolled them up in a tube and just mailed them to a girlfriend, Anita Politzer, in New York. And Anita kind of boldly and brashly takes them to Alfred Stieglitz, who they barely knew. He was famous and well-known. They knew his gallery. And Anita takes these drawings and they unroll them in his gallery. And he was a sharp guy. He was kind of a jerk in a lot of ways, as we find out later. But he was very bright and he understood art. And he immediately went, whoa, these are amazing. And he was particularly struck because she said, well, they're by my girlfriend. And so the fact that they were amazing art and amazing art by a woman, that really caught his attention, because he was all about discovering new artists, kind of breaking artwork. But especially the fact that it was a woman, he realized this was a big deal, and it was a big deal. And so that's sort of the moment when she sort of discovered, it's a long time before she has a show and becomes, famous in the New York circles. But that was sort of the big break for her, because he was a big deal in the art world, and he saw that it was really great work.
Was the research that preceded the documentary before you filmed anything? What was that process like?
Oh yeah, there was extensive research. Well, first of all, we collaborated with Beth Turner, who had curated the exhibit at the Fralin. She's was an art historian teaching at the University of Virginia, and one of her students, Jonathan Chance, we relied on him heavily for research early on into a huge number of archival images and photos, and of course her artwork. And we were very fortunate to establish a relationship with the George O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe. They were wonderful, providing a number of resources to us, including the permission to use most of her artwork, because they retain the copyright on much of it. So we just slowly put the pieces into place, did a lot of research, reached out to these different historians and scholars, and sort of started creating the idea of the film. And as you see, it became very much a straight biography, birth to death, which was not, well, first of all, there was also a 3-hour version of the film.
I was going to ask that. There must have been so much material that it was hard to keep everything in, because she lived such a rich and full life.
Yeah.
There were so many, but we felt strongly that we didn't want to go to 3 hours. We wanted to have people be able to really feel comfortable in one seating, sitting in one, if at all possible. And
it's funny you say that, because my brother was just over my house over here with his family, and we were just talking about this thing that was on the news yesterday with this couple climbed on top of the Empire State Building on the native. And I was just saying, I was like, get ready for a 5-part Netflix documentary.
Yeah.
On how they did.
We love series. We love all kinds of films and filmations and formats. They're obviously there can be good work, and
of course, but sometimes they do draw it out a little bit too much.
Particularly documentary.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like that could have been done as I'm glad that you guys did this as a feature film, quite honestly.
Well,
and we also we had initially kind of assumed it might go right to public television or something, and then it suddenly took off in theaters. So we were just thrilled.
That's awesome.
Up there, and it's played in, over 125 theaters.
That's amazing for a documentary. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, especially nowadays. Forget it. That's really substantial. That's substantial. Yeah.
We really credit Violet Crown movie theaters for that, in part because they have theaters in 4 cities, and they asked to screen it in all 4 of those cities.
Wow.
One is Charlottesville, right here.
Amazing. Yeah.
Santa Fe, Dallas, and Austin. And so they showed it. I mean, Santa Fe ran it for 15 weeks.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
That Violet Crown is actually now called Sky Cinema. But in any case, so we had this amazing launch for it, and then theaters started reaching out to us, and we reached out to them. And it just kept snowballing. And we love people seeing it on the big screen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's everything.
I'm
Yeah.
happy we have the chance to provide that opportunity to them. And now it's on streaming platforms.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
on stream, and that'll be a chance for many more people to see it. But I have to say, you know how, because you follow feature films, you probably know this, Seth, but Sean Baker. The
Oh yeah,
director,
yeah,
he
yeah.
kind of-
But Nora and Tangerine
Exactly.
and the Florida Project, and also nice guy, by the way. I've met Sean Baker. Like,
Yeah,
he's
he
also a New
seems
York
great.
filmmaker. Very nice guy.
but he's pushed this idea of let's get back to looking at movies in theaters.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of filmmakers are kind of feeling that we're all in pain over, the decline in the movie theater experience. But most people don't associate it so much with documentaries. And
Right.
it's like with this film, people they love just seeing her paintings on a 40-foot screen.
yeah,
Really exciting for them to see and to have a camera moving through all the places that she lived, to see, the landscape in New Mexico or in upstate New York that she experienced and that inspired her art, to see that on a big screen. It's really impactful. And it's also great. We were talking earlier about the audience for the film. It's so great to have a couple hundred people, jammed into a theater and just experiencing that film all together as a group of people. It's really,
yeah.
it's real. And so we're thrilled that it's on, iTunes and Amazon and the video on demand platforms. That's great because you can reach more people that way. But we're still showing it in theaters, by the way.
That's so
And-
cool. I love that.
You got to do that.
Yeah.
Continue to show it in theaters.
That's my favorite part as a filmmaker is watching your movie on the big screen with the audience. Right? There's nothing There's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
It's really
That's
not.
right.
There's really not.
Yeah. And there's a lot of visually rich information in your movie because it's about this really compelling artist. And, and she, I loved how she carried herself too. She just had like this cool sort of persona,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, really powerful. And yet, well, I think over the years, particularly for that generation of women who came of age in the 70s, she represents this, strength and power and, power of her will to make art and to live her life as a strong woman in the world. But also, one of the things we do in the film that I wouldn't say it's controversial, but it's surprising to a lot of people who feel they know who George O'Keeffe is. We talk about some of the, difficulties that she faced. For example, if she stopped painting in 1933 for the whole year of 1933, because she had it's hard to diagnose, but today we'd probably say it was a nervous breakdown. And it was connected to this kind of difficult relationship that she had with Alfred Stieglitz.
Yeah.
They were lovers. They had this very passionate, very hot, sexually passionate relationship, but and a really deep connection as artists. But of course, he had his girlfriend on the side while he was married to O'Keeffe. And he was just a very contentious, difficult personality. And so it was kind of this love-hate, tempestuous relationship. And what's so amazing is during her lifetime, she did not talk about those aspects of her relationship. There's a nice film that was made in 1977 when she was in her 90s. And she talks about Stieglitz, but she doesn't go into all this detail.
Yeah.
But it's in the letters that were released 20 years after she died. So we had access to a point of view from her that she never actually gave in her lifetime. You know what I mean?
That's pretty cool.
Talked about.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool because we have this intimate perspective on this really contentious relationship that she had with Alfred Stieglitz. And that's kind of the narrative thread in the film, really, that kind of draws you along across her life.
Now, were you guys reading a lot of her letters, and was it hard to read her handwriting?
Fortunately, they'd been transcribed.
Okay.
Fascinating to try to read her handwriting.
Yeah.
Cool.
It is really cool, but I was looking at it. It's visually awesome, but I was thinking about that. I was like, wow, if somebody handed me this and I had to read this, it would be pretty tricky, I feel like.
particularly if it was 25,000 pages of it.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
it is.
That's
What
amazing.
happened was, so 20 years after her death, those letters are released. They're in the Beinecke Library at Yale, the physical letters. But then they were, transcribed and published in a book called My Faraway One that was at least the first volume, several years of the letters. And that was the basis. We were able to go through the book and read all the letters just in printed form. And then for particular ones where we wanted to actually film that letter, then we went to the Beinecke with the date and everything, and we could track down the original, handwritten text and film that for the film.
Nice.
Yeah.
If Georgia O'Keeffe could watch the finished film today, which scene would you hope that she'd appreciate the most?
Oh, which scene?
Yeah.
Most? Oh, wow. That's a good question.
I'm glad you didn't ask if she'd like it or not.
I think you honored her very well. Yeah.
Well, we feel we did. As filmmakers, you're like, you really don't.
It's an unanswerable question because that's an unanswerable question, really, because you never know how people get funny about seeing themselves depicted.
Exactly.
And, I just loved how honestly badass that she was. Like when all those women invited her to like the convention and she just was like, no, I'm not going. And she was older. They just assumed she'd be there. And she's like, nope. And I'm like, wow, I wish I had I just love how authentic she was, that she could just decline such a thing and just not even think twice about it,
Yeah, no, that's what's been so amazing. The through line in her life, I mean, her integrity is astonishing.
It really is, yeah. I would probably go just out of politeness, even if I didn't want to.
Right. Or because they were going to flatter me,
Yeah, or whatever, it's just
Yeah.
Very uncompromising and very, very, in some ways very rigid and unforgiving, for better or worse.
Yeah. You got into that about her, her being cutting off friends ruthlessly if she, felt like they, did the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, she was a tough cookie, to say the least. She was tough on other people, but she was tough on herself too.
Yeah. And it's also the times I always try to look at the lens of if you grow, the average person was just tougher 100 years ago because they just had to deal with things that the modern people just don't have to deal with.
Right.
One
of the things a point that we try to make very early in the film is she grows up on this farm, as Ellen was saying, it's got a little, it's a farm on the outskirts of a town called Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. And, it was a family farm and a pretty successful, productive one. But, she grew up learning, if you don't take responsibility for taking care of this land, raising the crops, doing the chores, doing the work, cooperating with your family and your neighbors to make a success of the farm, you won't survive. And there's nobody to fall back on. It's all on you and your hard work. And she kind of grew up with that, Midwestern farmer mentality of damn it, I've got to do this and I'm going to do it. And she kind of took that attitude into her work as a painter. So she was kind of famous for she had actually lots of friends and socialized and knew how to have a good time and everything. But boy, when it came to her work, she wanted to be by herself and work and have quiet and peace around her so she could focus on that artwork, giving it the same kind of attention, frankly, that her father and family did to the farm that she grew up on. Just that kind of, it's about the work,
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Responsibility to the work, that you're not doing it to be famous or to win praise or, be wooed by the critics or the public adulation. It's about work and the satisfaction that the work itself gives you.
Right. And that's really interesting. And then just the notion of living on a farm and just knowing that there's not instant gratification on things, and that things take time to sort of, really sprout out and flower out. And that's pretty cool. also the film was narrated by Claire Danes as well as Hugh Dancy. So I thought that was really interesting. And how did that come about?
Did
Oh,
you
no, go ahead.
realize they're a married couple?
No,
Yeah,
I didn't know that they were a married couple, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, well, we were huge fans of both of them, and when we first started thinking about, well, who could do the voice of O'Keefe, Claire Danes was right at the top of our list, and we knew she was probably very busy, but we tried to get her attention, and we did. We were able to contact her through her agent, and we also thought, maybe it would be more appealing if they were both involved in the project.
Ah, good thinking.
That seemed to work because they both signed on, and we were thrilled because Claire Danes, her speaking about integrity, her artistic integrity matches O'Keefe's. I would say, she's
so great, and I grew up watching her because she was on the show when I was, young, called My So-Called Life, and it was only for one season, but she just I think I was in middle school when that came out. I wasn't even in high school yet, and that just was everybody talked about that. And so I've always followed her career since then, up until recently. She was on this show called The Beast in You on Netflix.
Yeah.
And that was incredible. I watched that with my wife. And
really intense.
It was super intense. And she brings that kind of intensity to her work. That's
exactly. And it was interesting kind of working with her because in the film, we have the real O'Keefe. We have film clips of interviews with her. And Claire Danes reading a lot of the letters. And kind of tricky sometimes, because sometimes they actually butt up against each other. A clip, a voiceover from.
Got you. Yeah. But it never felt janky. It never felt like, that's kind of
part of it. That's tribute to Claire Danes because her approach is not to try to imitate O'Keefe, or sound like O'Keefe or anything like that. What she's about is taking the text in front of her and finding the emotional core of it. And, if you're true to that, then it just transcends all the peripheral things about, she doesn't sound like George O'Keefe at all. What's wrong? And you don't even think about those.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Into the genuine emotion that she embodies in the text, in reading the text. And that's all you care about, and that carries you forward in the film.
I've always wondered, how does that work? Are you guys in the room with her as she's recording it? Are you giving direction?
Usually we've done almost always documentaries, but a lot of times you're working with a movie star to do narration or to read letters, like in a historical film or something. We've worked with Liam Neeson and Gabriel Byrne. We did a film about Irish immigration a few years ago, and so we've worked with some fabulous actors, and almost always, once in a while, we'll have to do something remote, but 90% of the time, we're sitting in a studio, maybe a glass wall between us, but basically able to go through the text line by line, talk about its meaning and what we're after, and give them any notes on first take or second take.
Nice.
And that way. It's fun.
That's pretty cool. Was that recorded in New York?
Yeah,
yes.
That was, they live in New York, and they had recently had a baby, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of helped us, I think, because, so many times, obviously, great actors like that are away on location.
Yeah.
And because they had a child, they were kind of in New York, not wanting to travel. And so they were happy to have a gig where we could basically come in and lay it down the recording in one day, and they could get home.
Oh, wow. They did it in one day. That's incredible.
Oh, yeah. But no, Claire did her piece in probably half a day.
That's incredible.
Yeah. She's a terrific actor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Nice. And how do you guys as a directing and producing team, like husband and wife, is there a certain way that you divide your responsibilities that is natural to your workflow, or how does that usually work out?
Yeah, it's kind of varied depending on the project. We've been working out for decades together. So it really has varied quite a bit. But Paul is really, he was an experienced director when I met him. And so he definitely takes the large share of the directing duties and often writing and editing. And I've been much more on just the producing end of things.
Paul, would you won an Oscar at such a young age? Did that, how did you remain grounded after that?
I didn't. And I actually, there's a couple of times, I won an Oscar. That was probably the third or fourth film. And I actually said, "Oh man, that was easy. I'm going to win a bunch of these." And I haven't. So I haven't won the second one yet. So, but I mean, one thing, we made a zillion films, and just one thing you learn, and this kind of actually ties back in my mind in making the film about O'Keeffe and this idea of work. If you're making films because you're looking for the next Oscar, you're going to be, it's going to be a terrible career.
That's the wrong reason to be making films.
That's the wrong reason to make a film. But if you just love the work, of making the films, that's an endless source of joy.
Oh, definitely.
What's your favorite, of all the films you made, what's your favorite film? And that's easy. The one I'm working on, that's the one.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what gets me up gets my mind running and gets me emotionally excited and connected about the work, and of course I won't deny it. Of course it's great to win an Academy Award. It's great to win.
What year was it? What year was it that you won?
What was it? 85.
85. Yeah. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't know the history of the Academy, of who else was there. Amadeus. Okay, that was a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was great, and it was such a blast going to Academy Awards, and so I always compare it to there's the major leagues of baseball, and then there's the double A leagues. But the documentary filmmakers, we're like the double A league. We're riding the bus, and and so you're just kind of, but for that one night, dropped right into the middle of Hollywood with a capital H. And you're just around all these movie stars and lots of exciting stuff, and then suddenly you're not. You're back in Charlottesville, Virginia, and if you can't be in love with the work that you're doing day to day, the Academy Award doesn't help.
Oh yeah, there's so much work that goes into filmmaking and putting one of these things together that you have to be in love with it. Otherwise,
and it's fun because as you can probably see, being married together, him working together, it's kind of it's just like a big ball of wax of it's our life together.
Yeah,
and that's where the fun. That's why it's been fun, to be a filmmaker and to work on these films. And this one, we've had some good success with this George O'Keeffe film playing in theaters, which very often our documentaries do not. We don't get theatrical runs, so that's been exciting. But the main thing is it's our filmmaking, our relationship, and our marriage, and our kids. We have 4 kids who are now grown,
amazing.
But
nice.
It's been kind of just a big ball of wax, and
Are they involved? Are any of your children involved in film or production?
They are. Yeah, we have a daughter who's an actor who does a lot of voice acting, and we have a son who is a writer, director who did his first feature a couple of years ago and is trying to break in a lot of filmmakers.
Nice. Yeah. Did it play at festivals and things like that?
It did. Yeah, he had a couple of festivals, and he had done a lot of shorts, kind of classic thing. Had done some short narrative films and studied acting. He was coming more out of acting and theater, actually.
I think that's a good way. I think a lot of directors that come from an acting background are really. I think it's a good route because to be able to communicate with actors is so important.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're all about the script. They're used to looking at a script and trying to connect emotionally with a script, and that's what you have to do as a writer and director too.
Yeah, and every actor is different. I find that it's every actor. We're gonna get more into that once we get to that portion of the podcast, but I think there's a quote from Elia Kazan that if it's like I think he said, if I'm directing 20 different actors, I'm 20 different directors. And it's so true, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but what else are you guys working on? Any new projects that you want to highlight, or is this
we are we it's so early we don't want to talk
oh yeah, it's understandable. Yeah.
But it's interesting for us. We we released in 1999 a film that is totally a scripted dramatic feature film called Wind Horse, and but it's sort of based on documentary materials. It was filmed secretly, actually, in Tibet.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And it's about the political challenges of young Tibetans living under the communist regime inside China.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
So it was based on interviews that were done with young Tibetans, in Tibet. And then we wrote a script with fictional characters kind of based on these stories, and filmed it, as I say, a lot of it secretly in Tibet and in Nepal, and then released it. And it got a theatrical release. We played in about 100 theaters, and it did pretty well. So our new project is, I can't talk you much about the story, but it's also based on documentary materials, which makes sense because we're documentary filmmakers. But it is scripted, so it's based on some court transcripts from the early 20th century, but then we extend it out. Most of it's fictional, but it's based on actual characters from the early 20th century.
Cool.
Yeah. So
were there documentary filmmakers that inspired you to sort of pursue documentary when you were getting started and things like that?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. When I was, I mentioned that I took this one course in documentary filmmaking, and I saw a film that I thought was amazing. It was a film called, I remember this is film school in 1975. And I saw a documentary called Joyce at 34. And it's a documentary. It's on the Criterion Channel, actually.
Yeah, I subscribe to that. I'm going to check it out.
And it was produced and directed by a woman named Joyce Chopra, Chopra. And what was amazing, this sounds crazy now, but at the time it was a breakthrough film because it's a documentary film and it's about the filmmaker. So there was actually a term like, oh, this is a reflexive documentary, meaning it's like the subject matter of the film is the filmmaker's life itself. Which now it's like, well, that's not a big deal.
Right. But at the time, it was something new.
Like whoa, that's mind blowing.
Yeah, because at the time it was more like a cinema verite kind of Maisel's brothers. Let's be a fly in the wall sort of approach on things.
She was a colleague. Joyce Chopra was a colleague of the Maisel brothers.
Oh yeah. Oh cool.
Help me to the other.
And I love the Maisels brothers. I love their work, by the way. They're
Penny Baker.
That direct cinema sort of movement. Yeah.
Direct cinema, exactly. Yeah. So here's the crazy sequel to the story, Zach. 40 years later, I get a call here in Charlottesville, and this guy says, "Hey, Paul, I wanted to let you know there's a filmmaker who's moved to town. And, I thought you might like to meet her because it's a little town. It's not like New York where, there's zillions of filmmakers. We're kind of like, not that many filmmakers down here." So he says, it's a woman filmmaker. Yeah, her name is Joyce Chopra. I'm like, Joyce Chopra? And I remember the name. I remember the film. It really affected me. And so here she is. She has moved to Charlottesville, Virginia.
No way.
That was 8 or 9 years ago.
It was over 10 years ago.
10 years ago. And we become just like great friends.
That's wild. Yeah, how it's come full circle. Yeah.
Over now. But that was, so it wasn't so much a given filmmaker. It was more like an approach to filmmaking, because I came of age with cinema verite and this kind of direct cinema approach where it's about people, you know what I mean? It's about the lives of people revealed on camera.
Awesome. I love how your film was shot too. Like all the interviews were nicely lit and
Good.
framed. And
Yeah.
Do-
They're not. They're kind of low key in a way. I mean, there's a lot of documentary films now. They bring in a big crew and they, frame it wide and do fabulous lighting. Ours is, it's not that big a budget, and it was a little more understated. The important visuals for us were to get the camera where O'Keeffe had lived and where she walked, and to get a moving camera through those environments so that you can see the world as she saw it at that time. Of course, for viewers who don't know, she was totally into nature and totally inspired by nature. So we were able to actually find the actual environments, the places that she lived and painted and walked through and experienced. They're still there. And so we're able to move through the camera through those spaces, and then see the paintings that were inspired by her life in those places.
Yeah, it was awesome in New Mexico, and just like her house over there. Yeah.
But other places.
And even Lake George and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And,
Yeah.
that was really cool. Actually, the first time I ever went to Lake George was, I used to work for IBM doing like filming content, making documentary sort of segments like that they would, about some of their technologies that were coming out, like quantum computing. Yeah, I shot in Lake George because IBM would turn Lake George into like a smart lake. They would put like smart sensors to do like analytics on the lake, and like if there were, just different data points and stuff like that. So I was filming, I had to like it was like a crazy day of filming because I'm like filming B-roll and interviews with and I was just like a one-man sort of band, like filming everything, and then like going like with my gear and just like going on the other side of Lake George to like film something, like the scientists over there. And it was beautiful. I remember. And
it's so beautiful area. And it was a big part of her life and a huge influence on her life.
Yeah. I noticed that. Yeah. And I thought that was really cool too, how she, like, there's just so many different settings in your film of just like going to New York and Lake George and New Mexico and the Midwest. And it's like, there was just a lot of, like I said, visually rich. Say it again.
And the of her as an American filmmaker, you watch the film and you're seeing all parts of America.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was pretty fascinating. And yeah, well done. Yeah. Really enjoyed it. I recommended it already to numerous people. So
that'll great. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Yeah.
Thank
And we
you.
appreciate you for the interview. It's fun.
Definitely. So now we're going to segue to the second portion of the podcast where I ask each guest to list two of their favorite movie scenes. And Ellen, you picked the scene from Days of Heaven, the Terrence Malick film. It was a great film, a beautifully shot film, of course. Yeah. And for people that don't know, Days of Heaven, it's an American romantic period piece drama written and directed by Terrence Malick. Came out in 1978, and it starred Richard Gere, Brooke Adams, and Sam Shepard. And it's about a laborer and his girlfriend who pose as siblings while working on a wealthy farmer's estate in the Texas Panhandle, and then just leading to a tragic love triangle set against breathtaking landscapes. So I guess tell us a little bit about this film, like did you see it at the time it came out?
I did. And I've seen it many times since, but that's a very hard question to pick a favorite scene.
Yeah.
No, I know. And I always say kind of like, to people don't.
Of course.
I know it is a hard question for film people.
But
I always try to like soften the question by saying like, it doesn't have to be like distilled down to your most absolute favorite scene, but any scene that you like for any reason, really.
But again, that it is absolutely one of my favorites. It's just so gorgeous and it's just so beautiful.
So the scene that you chose is there's a locust swarm, and so I guess tell us a little bit about it and why you like it.
Well, it's it's very dramatic. It's sort of an apocalyptic vision, really. This very horrible vision of the locusts swarming and just rising up, and it's just very murky and with this diffused light coming through, and so it's very sort of end of the world, a reckoning moment, which reflects the relationship that this whole triangle has been going on up at the big house. And so I just find it incredibly compelling and moving scene.
And I know that from reading up on this movie, a lot of the film was famously shot during magic hour, just after the sunset, giving it this sort of dreamlike sort of look. And
speaking of the look, talk about Jack.
Well, yeah, the production designer.
Oh, Jack Fisk. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's incredible. He just did Marty Supreme, actually. And I just had the locations manager, one of the location managers from Marty Supreme that did all the New York segments, Ross Brodar, on the podcast, who worked with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, Jack Fisk, a friend of ours, he lives here in Charles.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, great.
He's a friend of yours? Jack Fisk is a friend of yours?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a close friend.
But he's a legend. Yeah.
Because I emailed with him.
Yeah. And again, I don't use that term lightly, but he really is a legend in the film industry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
incredible.
And he worked with David Lynch a lot. And he's friends with David Lynch. And I think they were roommates or something in college, right?
They went to school together, I think, in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And of course, he's married to Sissy Spacek. Jack is.
Right, that's right. I think I read about that. They also did Badlands with Terrence Malick, right?
They met each other working on Badlands.
Badlands is a great film too.
Right, exactly. Well, Terrence Malick,
Yeah.
It's great stuff. So, yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. But, Jack has done so many films that are about America too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just where he's so often called upon to recreate another era in American history, like with the film Ellen's talking about, but also Badlands and, Marty Supreme, and just one after another, he's plunged into these projects and just kind of creates in detail, recreates a whole American world in, very specific locations and situations. And it's brilliant at it.
Yeah, he's considered one of the best production designers of all time, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, people put him in that sort of regard, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people had been hoping that he's going to win an Academy Award. He hasn't won an Oscar, has he? I don't think. At any rate, he deserves one.
He definitely does. Yeah, it's shocking that he hasn't. But I never know how they vote on those things.
Yeah, you can't control that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Work out. Yeah.
So Terrence Malick has such an interesting way of how it's like he has an interesting relationship with nature that it's like he's able to capture something that I feel like no other filmmakers could capture in the way he films kind of nature.
Yeah. Well, my theory is I think he was a philosophy major and Ellen was a philosophy major. So I think that's why she did that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Actually, and his films you can feel the philosophy piece. They're not action movies. They're really compelling because they're just, wow, man, he's just taking me to this world and he's helping me think about what does the world mean. And, it's really compelling stuff. And that scene that Ellen describes is kind of famous for that quality of just catching you up in this moment of crisis in these people's individual lives and the lives of that society, of that world at that time.
Nice. Is there any other things that you wanted to say about it, Ellen? Any?
Oh gosh, no, not really. I just love the whole film.
It's a great film. I'm glad that you mentioned this one because it made me rewatch. I didn't rewatch the whole film, but just rewatching the opening sequence the other day and the way he just even working in that steel mill and just like that whole thing was like really cool. And I actually use it as a reference point, quite honestly. I sent it to my cinematographer because I have like in my next film, like, I don't know if I should include this part in, but like the guy's a welder and I'm like, this is how we got to shoot.
Yeah.
I was like, we got to do an homage to this,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then they were loving that. The producer and the cinematographer was like, oh yeah, like, definitely.
Another funny local connection. Ellen and I were invited down to come down to a Terrence Malick set here in Virginia. He shot
The New World.
The New World.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's filmed here in Virginia. And we went down there and I saw, part of the time we were there, he had a camera crew out with the camera set up on a tripod looking up at a tree, and they were just like filming the tree branches moving in the breeze and the wind.
Yeah.
For like an hour.
I love it.
Laughing because that's what documentary filmmakers, that's what we do all the time.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, obviously he had, acting scenes and everything and actors in that film, but a lot of what he's interested in is just like the mystery of the world that you're in and, looking at trees like O'Keeffe would look at trees, and just spend time looking up at a tree in New Mexico near Taos and actually painting the tree as she saw it from below.
Yeah, from a unique perspective. Yeah,
exactly.
That's pretty cool. And Paul, so you mentioned the film East of Eden,
right?
That was directed by Elia Kazan.
Yeah,
and with James Dean, in one of the only. I didn't realize he was only in 3 movies, really.
Yeah. And East of Eden, I think, was one of his first.
I think it was. I read that it was his first. I just learned that.
You would know better
from. I just learned that from reading up on it, and I'm glad that you put me on to this film because I'd always heard of it and I'd never watched it before. Quite honestly, it was just one of those ones that I've heard of, but it slipped through the cracks, and it just it's funny how like sometimes you have an impression of something before you watch it, and then it's totally different. It's just like way better than what my impression of it. I thought it was going to be just kind of like I don't know, maybe like boring or something like that. And it was just like really, really good.
Well, I think for your listeners who have heard of James Dean, and seen the posters or whatever, if you're going to watch, they don't really have a sense of like, well, what was he like as an actor and everything? This would be a great scene to watch.
Yeah, the film is about a troubled young man named Cal, and who's played by James Dean, and he desperately seeks the love and approval of his emotionally distant father, and while struggling with jealousy toward his seemingly perfect brother. But I mean, it's so much more than that. It was just really, it had so much nuance, like for a film of its time, that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah,
and
it's a case where I loved the book. And then, and also, well, I guess I saw the movie first. I love the movie. It took me back and I read the book, and then back to the movie again. And actually, I loved your question about like, think of the scene. And now I haven't actually seen the movie in quite a while. And I want to go back and watch the movie, but I did rewatch that scene.
The scene with the Ferris wheel. So I guess, without spoiling too much.
Yeah. So what's going on for your listeners? His brother is kind of a Cain and Abel story, between the good brother and the bad brother. And of course, James Dean is the bad brother. He's like the kind of the hood, and, juvenile delinquent type. And his brother has a girlfriend, and the brother's very pious and righteous and maybe a little self-righteous. And the girlfriend's played by this beautiful, passionate young woman, played by Julie Harris, who was young at the time, obviously became, very famous actress. And what happens is the brother is not there, and James Dean and Julie Harris, his brother's girlfriend, end up on a Ferris wheel, and the Ferris wheel gets stuck, and they're at the top of the Ferris wheel. So it's this awkward situation where he's in the Ferris wheel car with his brother's girlfriend, which she probably shouldn't be there, and she shouldn't be there. And of course, what happens is, in the course of their conversation, they fall into a kiss, and then like, oh no, we can't be doing this, And so it's this intense emotional situation performed by really like 2 of the great actors in Hollywood history, in Julie Harris and James Dean. So, particularly for people who don't have a handle on what James Dean was like as an actor, I would really encourage people to watch the film, obviously, but even just that one scene, you just see this performance and you really get a sense of like what the whole mystique about James Dean as a actor and as in that character, but also who he was as a person where that mystique, how that mystique has been built up around him. Because the scene is just electric emotionally. It's just two people sitting in a Ferris wheel car. That's all it is. So,
well, it ends in a dramatic way of him climbing down the Ferris wheel because things are like hitting the fan down, like where his brother is about to be attacked. So that was also equally interesting of just like, whoa, like he's just bouncing into action to go and help out his brother at the same time. So the juxtaposition of him betraying his brother and then helping his brother was also
I guess
fascinating.
It goes to the core of the story dynamic.
Yeah. And that was pretty cool about his character of just, that's, I guess, what made it really interesting.
Yeah. And as you said, it's a whole thing about, his relationship with his father. And, they're kind of like these eternal themes in storytelling, that I think are just inherently powerful. And it's a little melodramatic. It's of its time, but the acting is so good, even in the kind of melodramatic context, with the music a little bit too aggressive and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I was thinking, it's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking about that. I was thinking, that's exactly what I was thinking about when I was watching it earlier.
It's totally big, unlike the, Ellen's film.
Of like Days of Heaven. Days of Heaven. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting exercise, I think, particularly for young filmmakers. Go back and look at a movie that's kind of out of date and doesn't play, and find out, well, what made it great at the time,
I think about that all the time.
And what's going on, I think, is the way the characters are written and the performances are so fantastic, that they kind of transcend the dated quality of
I think directors had a better sense of blocking actors at that time because a lot of there was like, I don't want to say there's not directors that are amazing at it now, but I think because there was a lot of wide shots that were used more.
Yeah.
So I think the blocking of the actor, there was more attention put onto the blocking of the actors and even actors that were in the background of a shot, that sort of.
Also, one thing, talking about kind of the datedness of that film and that era and that scene, but one thing they did do, I read something with the cinematographer, I can't remember his name now, but he talked about that Elia Kazan didn't want to just see, it's just these two people sitting in a car. They could have filmed it in a studio, and just had a rear projection of the
right.
But he wanted them actually in a real Ferris wheel. They brought in a real Ferris wheel ride, set it up on the back on it in the studio, and created the whole backdrop to the set, and got the camera and the sound gear and the lights, these big, those big Klieg lights, 10Ks, up on platforms, so that they could actually have the couple actually in a car at the top of the Ferris wheel while they're filming, even though the framing is just like this, it's just the two of them.
You felt it though. I know you're saying you felt that it was a real Ferris wheel and it felt like a real carnival.
That would help the actors too.
Totally.
Here they are.
Yeah.
They really are stuck with each other, at the top of this Ferris wheel, and it comes through the performances.
I read that Elia Kazan deliberately kept James Dean separated from some of the cast members to heighten emotional tension.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's probably wasn't done that much back then.
Yeah. It would be interesting to work with James Dean. It might not have been easy to direct him.
Probably not. Yeah.
Very strong personality.
Yeah.
But, that's how good a lot of good actors are,
Yeah.
They're controllable, but in a good way.
Marlon Brando is famously tough to direct, and he came from that same sort of school.
Yeah.
Lee Strasberg, Elia Kazan sort of actors.
Yeah. When I was thinking about scenes, of course, I love The Godfather, and I was thinking about those.
Oh yeah.
Openings. That's a great one too.
So great.
Maybe for your listeners, it'd be interesting to go back to something they aren't as familiar with, something older.
No, it's a good point. I was literally thinking, just like what you said, like it made me wonder. I'm like, if this was an A24 film, how would this be filmed? Would it would be like a close, instead of a wide shot, it would be like a super close up over here,
Yeah.
And Yeah, no, I try to think about things that way, but it's hard to kind of gauge it because it's like cinema has a language. It's like it's kind of like a grammar that's evolved since then. But because of those films, that's why it's evolved. Like that, those sort of films that both of you mentioned push the envelope of the evolution of the form.
Exactly. Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to go back and watch films, even if they sort of don't work anymore because they're sort of dated.
Yeah.
And to sort out what is it. And a lot of it, I think in that scene, for example, it's the music. It just feels heavy handed and, kind of too mellow.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Spoke about the performance. The performance is so true, and I think that's a good reminder. What, as we make films today, what are the things that we really have to get right? And it's always going to be the casting and the performances.
Always. Yeah. That's so true.
The other stuff, shifts with
the times. Yeah. Definitely. Well, I'm so grateful to have both of you on the podcast. Where could people follow along with you? Do you have a social media or a website or?
Well, the website is georgiao'keeffefilm.com. Yeah.
Excellent.
So,
beautiful.
Yeah. And that has all the screenings and all the information about it is available there.
Yep.
So thanks so much for having us on.
Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate it and love what you're doing with the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Film Situation podcast with your host, Seth Cotter.